Now I am standing at the beginning of the Cedar Island Trail. And this is the trail that we're going to be walking along and talking about for our program today. But before we go on our walk, we need to talk about the things that we all need to be doing to look out for one another. The first thing is make sure that you're wearing your masks. If you can't get your social distance, which if you remember this morning's program, that's 36 stickleback fish away from one another. That's the distance you need to keep between each other. Then you need to wear your mask. Also, if you visit one of our state parks, please follow the guidelines. If the park is closed or the parking lot is full, please find a different place to hike or walk. Okay? I'm also going to ask everyone to look out for your neighbors. Reach out to the people around you. See if there is anything that they need. See if you might have some supplies that they don't have. Just check on one another. We're all in this together, and working together is how we're going to get through this. All right, are you ready to walk along this trail and see what we can see? I'm going to flip the camera so that you can see the trail as we go down. So this is a beautiful trail. It's a small trail. It was originally put in as a wheelchair accessible trail, and it's still in very good condition. Now we have a lot of sassafras trees around here. One of the things I want you to notice as I walk down the trail is the amount of green or lack of green, okay? There's a lot of green in the understory right now. No green up in the crown of the trees. The tops of the trees are pretty clear, but lots of green on the understory. Most of the green that you're seeing on the understory are invasive species. Over here we have a lot of honeysuckle. This is an Asian invasive honeysuckle, not the native honeysuckle, which we do have. You've got some poison ivy growing up the tree, not green growth, but that's really cool. You can see the bright red leaves. This is what people typically think of. When you think of poison ivy, this is what you think of. 3 red leaves growing together. As the year goes on, those leaves will change color. They will become green. Eventually, here at Hammonasset especially, they will turn yellow. And then we've got a bittersweet vine growing up here. Bittersweet is another oriental invasive. Okay, nice and green. Not a lot of other green growth, but that's a nice example of poison ivy right there. As we continue down the trail, these are some nice sassafras trees right here. You can see the distinctive bark of the sassafras. Sassafras was the original flavor of root beer. And then they switched to the birch tree after that. Sarsaparilla still gets its name from the sassafras tree. And I believe the natural sarsaparillas have sassafras root in them. Look at this beautiful white oak tree. This is absolutely amazing. Now, if you look at this branch, this is a very low branch at a very unusual angle, and it's very, very large. This is not something that you're going to typically see on a white oak tree, okay? When trees grow in the woods, when they're surrounded by other trees, they grow in a very different shape. Usually they're very tall and the branching begins higher up the tree. If a tree grows in open sunlight, where there's sun all the time, then their branches are going to start low to the ground, okay? So this tree began its life, there were not a lot of other trees around, and it started branching off very low. You can see the trunk of the tree is very wide, very thick, and it is not a very tall tree for a white oak. Absolutely beautiful tree though. White oaks were known as stave oak or stav oak because the staves of a barrel are made from white oak. I am on the Cedar Island Trail right now. case you missed the beginning, this is just the beginning of our Cedar Island Trail here at Hammonasset. There's another white oak in the back there. You can see it's not really tall. Being on the shoreline as well, there's a constant steady wind here, a lot more wind than you get further inland, and that stunts and twists and causes trees to grow thicker, shorter, and a bit more twisted. Instead of the nice straight branching you get. Now this tree with the white flowers, I actually don't remember what this is called. I keep wanting to say spice bush, but it's not, so we're going to wait and identify that one for you. There's a nice hickory tree. See if we see any hickory. Oh, yep, we've got some here. Some old hickory nuts. So you can identify some trees just by looking on the ground, seeing if they've left their seeds behind. This is a really popular food for squirrels. And if you look, both of these have a hole in them. So some, probably insect, has burrowed in and eaten it out inside, which is why it was left here and the squirrels or other animals haven't eaten them, because there's no fleshy nut meat inside, which is the reason that they eat these. This is a good example of the Asian honeysuckle. Again, this is an invasive. And this is one of my favorite trees right here. We should stop and take a look. This is a hackberry, okay? Hackberries get this splattered look on the bark. It almost looks like someone splashed concrete on the tree. It's really hard and it's just splattered around there. Gives it a really unusual appearance to the bark. Hackberry is an edible berry. People don't eat it very much anymore. Native Americans used to eat it. It is listed as a medicinal. They used to use it. I don't know what they used it for. It has a really sweet outer part of the berry, and the inner seed actually has a nutty flavor that's pretty good. So you get like a berry and a nut together in the seed of the hackberry. They don't grow very large. This is not a large tree, 30 feet. And it's a soft wooded tree. The wood is not good for building materials. It rots pretty quickly because it's a soft wood. But take a look at that bark. I'm always just fascinated at how hard these little things, you would think they would break right off, these little protrusions, but they are on there solid. So really cool, crazy tree we have here. Here's another one of the Asian honeysuckles. Now, I'm going to do this walk in probably a month, maybe a little shorter, and we're going to see what the difference in the greenery is. So right now we've done a program already on Phragmites, so the tall reeds you see there, those are Phragmites, also known as common reedgrass. When we come back here, let's see how much green has changed, how much of this brown growth will turn green by the time I walk this trail again. So be a really cool experiment to see if you can notice the difference in the greenery along the trail. Another oak tree over there, that's not a white oak, looks like a red oak, but again, not very tall, stunted, and branching right from the bottom. So that tells you that that tree grew in open sunlight and not surrounded by other trees. All right, we're going to come up on this trail bridge and we can look out across the marsh. No green except over here, some nice green in this area, but out in the open marsh we're not seeing any green yet. So this will be really cool to see what this looks like in a couple of weeks. See how much the salt marsh has changed, or the trees that are all along the trail, how much they have changed. Now, if you look back over there, remember we said the Phragmites is an invasive. If you look back, you can see the brown is all Phragmites, and then all that green over there, that's the honeysuckle and other invasives. So we do have two different invasives growing right next to each other, but the Phragmites has not bloomed yet. I don't know if you just heard that, a willet just called. So we'll see if we can get the willet on camera here. I'm not seeing anything yet. There's an egret out in the marsh right there. Looks like a great egret. There are two common egrets we get here at Hammonasset. We get the great egret and the snowy egret. Very common. The great or common egret, sometimes it's called the common egret, depending on the book you look in. This telephone pole in the middle of the marsh was actually an original osprey platform. Now it has a bat box on it. All right. Let us move down the trail a little bit further. Some green grasses. The grass has already started growing here. These that are just starting to bloom out, this is high tide bush. Grows right along the high tide line. That's how it got its name. And it does flower later in the year. It has a beautiful flower. So again, I am walking the Cedar Island Trail here at Hammonasset Beach State Park. I'm going to ask everyone to continue to put up your questions or comments, and please continue to post where you're messaging from. I appreciate knowing how far this program is reaching. Would also be great if everybody let your friends know about these programs, and maybe they can join us on one of our virtual walks. Take a look. So that first area that we were in started out, there were lots of invasives on both sides. You get out here and you're not seeing as much green. And one of the reasons is this area doesn't have the invasives like back in that first section. So these plants haven't quite come in. One of the things that, the reasons that invasives are so green this time of year, that's what makes them invasive. They start blooming before the other plants, and that gives them an advantage over the native plants. And to be an invasive, you have to be, number one, not native, and number two, harmful to the environment. And most of those plants are harmful because they grow faster and more readily than plants that are native here. Now here we've got a nice little tree. Now this one's leafing out. There aren't a lot of them around, but I see a few. But this is the most green we have seen from our natives. And this is a cherry, choke cherry. It's a wild cherry that grows out here. Birds love the cherries. The hackberry, the birds love the hackberries too. So the native plants are a great food source for our local birds. The invasives, not so much. Many of the invasives don't carry the same nutrients that the local plants, the native plants have. So the animals that have adapted to eat local plants, they could eat the other plants, but they don't get all of the nutrients that they need. And many of them don't even try and eat the invasives because they don't have the nutritional value that they're looking for. Lots of white oaks out in this section. Now there's a great example. I was talking earlier about the twisted form that the oaks take when they grow in the open and in the wind. So this tree started branching very low, so it grew in full sun, but it's all twisted and bent. That constant wind, the cooler temperatures sometimes along the shore will cause it to grow in a funny way like that. Here's another hickory. I love the bark on those mockernut hickory tree. All right, let's go along. The hickories have a really large bud too. Take a look. They're actually starting to bloom out there. But There we go. That's it. Are we in focus? It's not focusing very well on that, but you can see nice big buds on those hickories. These are open. The buds that aren't open are large as well. It really doesn't want to focus on the thing that's up close, does it? All right. Well, that was a hickory bud. Hickories tend to have, I think that the hickory is the largest bud of any of the trees that I know of. We should do a program just on buds, all the different buds. Really good tree people, all they need to do, look at the bark and a bud and they can tell you what the tree is. Sometimes I need a little more than that. All right, let's keep going. We're heading for the end of the Cedar Island Trail, which is an absolutely amazing observation platform. Now, let's take a look at that oak back there. You can see it's not as twisted. The branches are low, but not as low, not as many low. So this tree grew in more sun. If you look at this tree here, the branches don't start and they're very small. So this tree grew in the shade. This one was growing in shade, where the ones on the other side, the south side, so this is the south side over here, you're getting lower twisted branches, and the branches are actually facing the south. Not as many branches in the north, where the other larger trees were shading them out. So really cool study of how trees grow depending on the sunlight, and again the wind. The harsh weather here in the winter is hard on some trees. Now take a look at this. This log got pushed in by a storm, pushed against this red cedar, and the red cedar is just growing right around it. The log is pushed right up tight against it. Lots of these logs are washed in. This area does get washed over with our heavy storms. Sandy and Irene, both this area was all underwater during Sandy and Irene. Now, we've talked about the moraine. We'll do probably more about the moraine, but a moraine are rocks left by the glaciers, and that's where these rocks came from. Okay, one of the features, one of the geological significance of Hammonasset are the exposed moraines that we get here, so you can easily identify them. This is one of the two moraines that are here, that are visible here at Hammonasset. Look, there's a lot of iron in that. Look at the iron in that rock. And the iron is rusted and turned this nice rusty color. And it's eroding away. The rest of the rock is pretty stable. All right, let's keep going. Someone's asking, how many trees in Connecticut? I don't know. I think when I was doing my tree courses, we had to learn about 50. So I'm going to say there's probably more than 50. Is the whole oak out state tree? So the state tree of Connecticut is the white oak. And if you're familiar with Connecticut history, the charter oak is, I believe, a white oak. Oh, here's something really interesting happening over here on the right. So you can see there's a yellow sign over there and some stakes in the ground in a sort of a circle with some string connecting them. That is, the string is called symbolic fencing. The signs are warning people to stay out of that area. Now, people shouldn't be in that area anyway. This part of Hammonasset is not accessible to the public at any time of the year. All right, this is the backside. If you see that giant boulder over there, that is the end of the moraine trail. You're not supposed to walk past that boulder any time of the year. So that area is, all of this area over here is part of the natural area preserve, which is protected area, which you're not supposed to walk into. This symbolic fencing is put up because people break those rules and go out into that area. But this is to protect the piping plovers. It's an endangered bird that nests out here. Some people call them plover. I've always said plover. I think you can call them either one. But they will nest on these dunes right out here. Occasionally we also get oyster catchers, which are another endangered bird that nests here at Hammonasset. And the least terns also nest here. Although usually I think we have common terns more than the least tern. But that area, we're protecting those birds. There are very, very few plovers left. So we are trying to protect them. Now, if we look here, there's a glacial erratic, that boulder right there. It actually sort of lines up with a moraine, so I don't know if we could call it an erratic. Erratics are usually left by themselves, but this may be, and actually there's another rock in the marsh there, so that may be considered part of the moraine that makes this area up. Someone has asked, does Meigs Point Nature Center have any freshwater vernal ponds? And no, we do not. The park really doesn't have any fresh water at all. We have a garden pond, man-made garden pond outside the Nature Center, which has become a freshwater haven for toads. They're in there singing right now. And birds will come and get drinks there. But no natural fresh water here at Hammonasset. That would be really cool though. We do get rain puddles, but a lot of times they do get contaminated with salt water, so I don't want to call them a freshwater vernal pool. And we used to have tide pools here. One of the storms back in the 90s washed out all the tide pools, and they've started to reestablish, but again, it's not big enough and sustained enough for me to really call it a tide pool. All right, so I will come right back to this spot in a couple of weeks and do the same thing, and I want you to notice the difference. So really take a look at what we can see right now, the amount of greenery, how tall the plants are, the wildlife that you see or maybe wildlife that you don't see. We're not seeing a whole lot of things right now. I am coming up on another egret, so you'll get to see an egret in a second. See the egret there? Just a white spot off in the distance. And actually that area right there, that is another area that the plovers might nest on. But if you see the log on that little dune, when we get snowy owls, that's the most popular place to find a snowy owl here at Hammonasset. They will sit up on that log, it gives them a little bit of height, and from there they can search for their prey, usually mice. Can birds drink salt water? Many of the birds are able to drink salt water or brackish water. The Hammonasset River is brackish water, and the water very often in a marsh is brackish. It's not fully salt water. It doesn't have the amount of salt that we have out in the Sound, so they can drink the water out of the marsh as well. And after a rain, the water is even has even less salt in it than it usually does. So there are times, so if you see these little puddles down here, in the summer sometimes the water will start to evaporate out and the salinity will go up in these little pools, and then sometimes you'll get more salt in these little salt ponds, they call them, than you do out in the sound. So here is another big boulder, and there's another one there, and it lines up with a couple over there and the rocks that we talked about back on the trail. So the boulders that are behind me now are probably part of the moraine. And Bill is asking, are there any fowler toads singing? There are fowler toads singing down at the East Beach parking lot pond, which is, or puddle, which is what I hesitate to call a freshwater puddle because sometimes there ends up salt in it. But yes, we do get fowler's toads down there. It's the coolest thing to see them, because you can stand right in the parking lot and watch them swimming around. Someone says, Max says, I have seen a seahorse in Clinton Harbor before. Are they always there, or is it just seasonal? So seahorses are found in Long Island Sound. I believe, though, that they're primarily in the summertime when the water is warmer. This is Clinton Harbor right here that we're looking at. And one of the Clinton Town beaches, I don't know if they have more than one, but the Clinton Town beach is way over there. And the trail, the Cedar Island Trail, gets its name because that is Cedar Island there. On the other side of that water is Cedar Island. It actually connects over to the park on this little, by this little, almost a sandbar or a sand dune connecting them. And at different times in history, that connection has been strong enough to actually have a road out to Cedar Island, and then there have been other times that it was pretty cool out here. Get a question. Have the ospreys laid eggs? What's the incubation time? Great question. Yes, they have. I believe they were up to 2 last time I saw. She stays on them all the time, so it's really hard to count. And the incubation time is about 28 to 30 days. So in about a month, we should start to see an egg hatch. Be a really exciting time. For anybody that doesn't know, you can check. Christina's saying that they have 3 eggs. So they do. There's 3 eggs on there right now. Very cool. You can check the eggs. You can watch the progress at meigspointnaturecenter.org. There's the video is right up there. You can watch it. And it has night vision capability, so you can watch them at night, which they're doing the same thing they do during the day pretty much, sitting on the eggs. Although the male will be out hunting fish during the day. So I'm going to remind everyone, you can like us, follow us on Facebook, YouTube. You can visit our website, meigspointnaturecenter.org, for all of these videos. You can watch the ones that we've done in the past. I have some great ones coming up. I'm going to remind everyone that we've got a horseshoe crab talk coming up on Thursday, 4 o'clock, and a talk on the COVID-19 virus on Saturday at 2 o'clock. So you can sign up for those at programs@meigspointnaturecenter.org. And then we'll send you the link, the Zoom link, so you can join in. You'll be able to do questions and comments. Somebody mentioned earlier about seals. It's a little bit warm for the seals to be out. We do have seals out in Clinton Harbor a lot. But again, it's kind of warm today, so I doubt we'll see any out on the rocks. But those far rocks you see, I'll zoom in a little bit, but my hand's a little shaky when I zoom in. Those far rocks in the water out there, that's typically where you're going to see the seals. That's where they like to go. So they'll be out there until the weather starts to get warm. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the program today. Remember, these programs happen Tuesday through Friday at 11 and 2 o'clock each day. We will have a park visit coming up this week. We're going to do a Copperhead program. I'll do a program, really special program on horseshoe crabs on Thursday, leading up to our after school or after work program. On horseshoe crabs, we're going to be looking at a baby horseshoe crab. So really, really cool if I can find him in the tank. He buries himself and I haven't seen him in a couple days, but I saw him over the weekend, so I thought we'll do a program on a baby horseshoe crab. All right, thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock.